Hey, good afternoon to you. It's 5:06 here, News Talk 105.9 WMAL, where we're making sense of the news. You can join us today, 888-630-9625, 888-630-WMAL.
There are lots of signs that the American economy is doing very well, better than most countries, I think. But the American people don't seem to be feeling it. Groceries are 25% higher, and people are blaming you and Joe Biden for that. Are they wrong?
We now have historic low unemployment in America among all groups of people. We now have an economy that is thriving by all macroeconomic measures. And to your point, prices are still too high. And I know that, and we need to deal with it, which is why part of my plan, you mentioned groceries. Part of my plan is what we must do to bring down the price of groceries.
Harris says she'll press Congress to pass a federal ban on price gouging for food and groceries, but details are yet to be defined.
All right, so that's the fantasy conversation on the economy that was taking place on 60 Minutes this week between Bill Whitaker and Kamala Harris. For a real conversation on the economy, let's turn now to Steve Moore. He's the founder of the Committee to Unleash Prosperity, a fellow at the Heritage Foundation, and he's got a new book out alongside the great Art Laffer. The book is The Trump Economic Miracle and the Plan to Unleash Prosperity Again. Steve, good to have you back with us, sir.
Vance, thanks for having me on. Great to be with you. And by the way, do you know who came up with that title of the book?
Who's that?
Just take a wild guess.
A wild guess. The Trump Economic Miracle. Would it be Steve Moore?
No. Guess again.
Would it be Donald Trump himself?
Yes. That's what happened. We went to see him about 3 months ago, told him about the book project. The book, by the way, is filled with charts and graphs about how the theme of the book is you just put side by side what happened to the economy when Trump was president, with all the most important statistics, and then what happened with Biden and Harris in the White House. And out of about 25 of those things, everything from small business conditions, Vince, to the stock market adjusted for inflation, to what happened to people's real incomes, to gas prices, to grocery prices, on and on, mortgage costs. Trump significantly has a superior record to Biden on almost virtually every one of these things. And so we were showing Trump these charts in the book, and I love this stuff. And he said, what are you going to call this book? And he said, well, Mr. President, we thought we'd call it Trumponomics 2.0, because as you may recall, Vince, Arthur Laffer and I about 6 years ago wrote a book called Trumponomics. I don't like that book. He said, call it the Trump Economic Miracle. So I said, okay, you don't say no to the president. So we said, sure, that's a good title.
Yeah, well, he's always been very good at that particular thing, coming up with names and nicknames and book titles, it turns out. Yeah, that's a good title, The Trump Economic Miracle. And it really captures the difference between these two administrations. A lot of economic success under Trump, a lot of dismal economic, well, you can't say achievements, but failures under the Biden-Harris administration. When you hear these questions from people like Bill Whitaker, and they always do the same throat clearing, well, all the indicators say the economy is doing great, but how come the American people don't feel it? When you hear those questions, what do you think?
Well, I'm going to go with the American people on that one. I'm not going to go with the, quote, experts. Did you remember that moment in the debate J.D. Vance had with Tim Walz? And Tim Walz kept talking about what the experts say.
Yeah.
And Tim Walz finally said, well, the experts are always wrong. They were wrong about the fact. Remember when the experts, Vince, said that, don't worry, Biden's policies won't cause inflation. Whoops. All of a sudden we went from 1.5% inflation to 9% inflation. So the experts are wrong here. And all you have to do is just talk to the average man and woman on the street, and talk to people like my wife, who every time I come home, she complains about how much everything costs, Vince, because she's the one who does the shopping, and she has to pay the medical bills, and she has to pay the credit card bills. And she's like, Steve, you're an economist, and you have no idea how much things really costs in the real world. And when she shows me those bills, I'm shocked. And I think a lot of people can relate to that. Look, this has been a lousy economy. And did you see Kamala Harris said, I think it was yesterday or earlier today, she said, there's not much of anything I would have done differently than Joe Biden.
Yeah, that was today on The View. She said that. She said, they asked her, she think of a single thing that she would do different? And she said no. In fact, she talked about what an important role she had in this administration.
Yeah, and exactly. And Susan Rice said she was integral in every decision. So that should tell you a lot, folks. I mean, this woman was alongside Joe Biden every policy decision they made, and that includes what I think was one of the greatest tragedies in our history, which was the $5 trillion spending spree that they launched. It had nothing to do with COVID. The economy, one of the lies that that Kamala Harris and Joe Biden keep talking about is how, we took over. You've heard this one, Vince. Oh, it was a mess. Remember when we took over, it was a total mess. No, it wasn't. The economy had been growing very rapidly for the last 6 months of the Trump administration as we opened up the economy, and we were ready for the second act of the boom. And let's not forget, for people who might be skeptical about this, if it had not been for COVID, Trump would have won a Reagan-style landslide. Remember how good the economy was right before COVID hit. And then, we were nicely coming out of it. And they used COVID as an excuse to pass this massive left-wing spending bill for all these green energy programs and welfare expansions and things that they wanted to do for 40 years. And, of course, that is what erupted the inflation that was the worst since Jimmy Carter was in office. And incidentally, the inflation isn't over. I mean, look what's happening with the commodity prices since the Fed cut interest rates. They're up by 11%. I'm here to tell you, when we get the next inflation report, it's going to show inflation back up again. And I hate to be a Debbie Downer here, but the inflation that we've seen under Biden, I think we're looking at Biden inflation 2.0 now.
Yeah, that's for sure. I've played this audio for you before, but I want to reiterate it here now, if I can, Steve Moore. At the end of 2021, Joe Biden, for a brief, fleeting moment, admitted that the so-called American Rescue Plan, that was the $1.9 trillion spending package that they passed. He admitted that it caused inflation at the Port of Baltimore, and this is what that sounded like.
It changed people's lives. But what happens if there's nothing to buy, you got more money, you compete for getting it there, it creates a real problem.
It creates a real problem. So he described what had happened with inflation on his watch, on Kamala Harris's watch. By the way, he never, ever again reiterated that talking point in public. Somebody got to him. But that was, you talk about experts, Larry Summers, the former Obama guy, was out there saying, guys, this is going to cause real problems in the economy.
I think Biden accidentally told the truth there for a second, and then they quickly reined him back in and said, don't tell the truth, because that's exactly what happened. You flood. Look, this is really simple stuff, Vince. I know that these so-called experts in the White House don't get this, but inflation, as Milton Friedman taught us, is too many dollars chasing too few goods, and that's exactly what happened. We massively flooded the zone with, handouts, free money for everybody, and everybody got all the free money, and then everything was 20% more expensive. Yeah. So it didn't work out so well. Look, the thing that's really scary, and the reason we wrote this book is, look, many people may decide, I'm not going to vote on the pocketbook issues. Maybe people say, I'm going to vote on abortion. I'm going to vote on social issues. I'm going to vote on, I don't like Donald Trump's behavior. And look, I respect that. People vote on, for different reasons. I just want to make sure if people are voting on the kitchen table issues, can you pay your bills? Are you going to get a pay raise? Are you going to be able to afford, a vacation this year? Then you're a fool to vote for Kamala Harris. I mean, her agenda is a $5 trillion tax increase.
Yes.
And Vince, I have a piece in the Wall Street Journal this morning that points out that if you do that, and they say, that's just for rich people. First of all, even if you took every penny from every rich person who makes over $1 million in the whole country, even if you took everything they got, you're still not going to be able to pay the bills.
Right.
So, of course, you're going to have to go after people like you and me and the people listening to the show. But second of all, you're going to just unleash with all the spending. They just announced another. Did you see this today, Vince? Another round of free. You don't have to pay back your student loans. Another one.
It's endless. Now, I just want to point out something, though, about all of this deception. So when they say things like, we're not going to raise your taxes, or we'll even cut your taxes, these are the types of promises that Kamala Harris is bandying about right now as an effort to get people to vote for her. What she's leaving out is what you've been talking about for years, Steve Moore, which is that when the government prints money, they're raising your taxes without an act of Congress, without bothering to even talk about a tax hike. They're taxing you through inflation. That's the way they take it out of you. And we're looking right now as people living paycheck to paycheck has exploded to record highs. You're looking at credit card debt exploded to record highs, credit card defaults exploding to record highs. The American people are miserable under this system. Voting for Kamala means you're voting for more of that.
Yeah, 4 more years of this, and that's why that quote today, where she said, "Look, I didn't oppose anything that Joe Biden did, so you're responsible for what happened as well." And you're also right about this, idea that somehow they feel like they can just make everything free. They're going to make, healthcare is going to be free, childcare is going to be free. You're not going to have to pay back your student loan. College is going to be free. All these things. I mean, it'd be a wonderful world if all you had to do was just print money and hand it out to people and be rich. I mean, I wish that's the way the world worked, Vince. Unfortunately, it's never worked anywhere at any time. And to pay for it by taxing American employers, my old boss, Dick Armey, who was, the House Majority Leader and a man I just adored, he used to have this Army axiom that liberals love jobs, but they hate employers. And he was so right about that. I mean, they keep talking about how much they care about the American workers. There are no jobs if you don't have profitable employers.
That's right. That's exactly right. And if you raise taxes on employers, you limit the number of jobs available to Americans. It's obvious stuff. But of course, Washington, always pretends differently. Hey, let me talk about let's turn to an optimistic topic then. Should President Trump return to office? I've been listening to all the interviews he's been doing. He just had a conversation, I think, with Dave Ramsey a week ago. He was talking about some of the economic goals that he has, and he thinks that he'll be able to cut the cost of energy very quickly. He'd like to cut it in half, come into office and cut it in half. Give me a sense of what you think President Trump's policies will do for the country, for the economy.
So the reason this is a great question and why, we wrote our book is that everybody's like speculating. There's this new report. Oh, Trump's going to cause a recession and Trump's going to blow a hole through the debt and all these things. And my reaction is, look, he's been president. It'd be one thing if it were Donald Trump, who had never been president, and then you could speculate and you could say all these horrible things are going to happen. But Vince, he was president for 4 years. We had one of the biggest economic booms ever, and we didn't see inflation. I mean, Kamala again today said, well, Trump's the one who's responsible for inflation. Huh? We didn't have any inflation when Trump was president. It only happened when you people showed up. And so all you have to do is just look at his record. And I think you asked the question, what's the second term going to look like? I think we're going to do a lot of the same things we did in the first term. It all worked. Our tax cut, as you know, Art Laffer and Larry Kudlow and I and some others helped write that tax cut for Trump. And when I used to see him at the end of his, term in office, I said, Mr. President, this worked out better than we even thought it would be.
Yeah.
And remember all the jobs we had? Huge surge in income. The biggest annual increase in family income ever. Biggest reduction in poverty ever.
Yes.
And not just for whites, for blacks, for Hispanics, for Asians, for every multicultural group you can think of. Which was, by the way, that brings me to a question for you. I always like asking you if it's a question.
Sure.
How in the world is Donald Trump a racist if he presided over the best economy for blacks and Hispanics and Asians ever?
Well, he's not, is the answer to that question. But let me, before I let you go, Steve Moore, I want to ask you one last thing, which is that part of President Trump's economic plan for another term is he wants to use tariffs strategically to benefit the country. And he recently, I mentioned Dave Ramsey, he was talking to Dave recently about the history of tariffs in the country and William McKinley's use of them before the income tax existed. Listen to this. Like, people think that Trump, so they're like, could Trump talk about history? Well, yeah, here he is.
The word tariff to me is a very beautiful word because it can save our country, truly. And yet, I think because of graft, because of a lot of consulting payments and other things that given by other countries, we have so much fighting with politicians on using it. I saved our steel industries by putting tariffs on steel that China came in and dumped. And you know what they do? They dump and dump and dump. Everybody goes out of business. Then they buy those businesses very cheap, and then they raise the prices to higher than they ever were. That's one of the many benefits that they have if they want to do it. But by putting tariffs on, as an example, in the furniture business in North Carolina, it was so vibrant, and they stole our business. And they charge us, if you wanted to build a furniture place, if you want to sell your furniture in China, they won't take it. But if you want to build a plant in China to make furniture in China using their labor, they open it. We're doing the same thing. But a lot of people like, oh, well, we don't want to have tariffs. The country was at the richest point in its history in the 1890s. It was all tariffs. If you looked at William McKinley as an example, he was a big tariff president. They had committees that were put in charge of what to do with the money. We were taking in so much money. And McKinley would say, why should we let other people come in and steal our factories and steal our workers and steal our jobs? And why shouldn't we benefit? And he tariffed the other countries. And we made so much, and then they went to the income tax system later on. But they would actually they had a blue ribbon committee. Our country was so rich, they didn't know what to do with the money.
That's President Trump on tariffs. What do you think, Steve Moore?
Well, I mean, Vince, you and I have known each other a long time. I'm a free trade guy. I believe free trade is, by definition, when two countries trade with each other voluntarily.
By the same set of rules.
But, yeah, here's the point, and this is exactly the point, that a lot of these other countries are not playing by the rules. You're right. And I actually believe, and we make this claim in the book, that, Trump is going to force these other countries he's going to use the leverage of threatening them with high tariffs and imposing them if they don't play along, if they keep cheating and stealing and, stealing our patents and predatory practices.
Yep.
They're going to get whacked. And look, Trump, I've known Trump now for 8 years. He is the best negotiator I have ever met in my life. You know his book, right? The Art of the Deal.
Yeah.
This guy is going to force these other countries to do things that are in America's interest and America's national security and economic interest.
Yes.
He did it in the first term. And meanwhile, we've got, Kamala Harris and Biden were pansies. They just roll over.
I know.
I love when Kamala says, well, all the other foreign leaders want me to president. Of course they do.
Yeah, because you're a
right
pushover,
over.
and you're right about him being
Exactly.
You're right about him being a good negotiator. He's so good, he changed the name of your book before it got released. Steve Moore, thank you.
There you go.
Really,
He's a marketing genius
He's
too.
a marketing genius. That's right. Steve Moore, thank you, and congrats on the book. Well, coming up on the Vince Coglianese show, Elon Musk is talking about what's going to happen if Kamala Harris wins. Elon says, I'm all in on Trump. There's no going back. He's right about that. Also, CNN guests are now saying that Trump is literally Hitler. What else do they have left? That's ahead. Hey, good afternoon to you. It's 5:35 here at News Talk 105.9 WMAL, where we're making sense of the news. You can join us, 888-630-9625, 888-630-WMAL. In fact, let's go to the phones. I want to check line 3 here. That's where we find Jennifer from Fairfax, who's been waiting patiently. Hello, Jennifer. You're on the Vince Coglianese show.
Hi. How are you doing?
I'm doing great, Jennifer. What's on your mind today?
Well, I went to vote today and at the government center, and I met Mike Van Meter, the 11th congressional candidate, and he was awesome. Everyone was out at the Republican tent. Seemed like no one was at the Democrat area.
There were lots of people there. So, Jennifer, just to be clear, you were at the Fairfax County Government Center. You said you saw the great Mike Van Meter today.
Yes.
And there were just lots of Republicans at their tent and very few Democrats there?
Yes, everyone was getting yard signs, requesting more and more yard signs. It was great. It was a great atmosphere.
And what are the Republicans there saying, the ones who've been working the tent there for the Republican Party? Has the traffic been good?
Yeah, I think so. It's just hard to know you can't trust the polling, obviously. But it seems it's great. And I met a 80-something-year-old guy from Peru. He said he had been voting since Reagan, and he said if Kamala wins, they're going to ruin the country. She's going to ruin the country.
Smart man.
I mean, it's people from all kinds of people.
Yeah, all walks of life, all coming out. They're tired of this.
Yeah.
I hope it holds. You know, one of the things, we were there the very first day that the Fairfax County Government Center got up and running, the first day of early voting a few weeks ago, and I was impressed by the number of Republican sample ballots that were being held by all of the voters who were walking into the polls. There were a lot. Those they were green that day, and it looked like quite a few people were taking them.
It's very optimistic, and I mean, there's hope. Even in Fairfax, when people are requesting signs like that in Fairfax, you just don't usually see too many Trump signs around. But lately I've been seeing them. And, you were playing your Kamala-thon earlier. So after I picked my kids up from school, I said, kids, Mama's going to vote right now. I can't take it anymore.
Oh, well, so see, Kamala's voice achieved something good for once, Jennifer.
Yes. Yes, thank you.
Thank you. Well, thanks for calling in. And Jennifer, we had Senator J.D. Vance on yesterday, and I asked him about Virginia. And you know what I really liked about that interview? He didn't really BS us at all. He was very candid about the assessment. And he was talking about all these swing states, and he's like, he feels good in some of them. He feels like things are a little tighter in others. But Virginia, he said, he's hopeful. He goes, I'm not going to pretend like this thing's going to be easy for us to win in Virginia, but he still thinks it's possible. And when people like you, Jennifer, get out there and actually cast your ballot, that's what makes it possible. So thank you for that.
Oh, you're welcome. But you got to talk to everyone at the polls. You got to keep talking to friends. You got to talk to friends of friends, acquaintances. You got to tell people. You got to spread the word and make them know that this is okay to vote for this person.
Yeah.
Because for whatever reason, people got really brainwashed, and we need to undo that.
Yeah, it's quite unfortunate.
Okay. We can be proud, loud and proud.
Amen. All right, Jennifer. Thank you very much.
Okay,
Yeah, that's the goal.
Thank you. Bye.
That's the goal, to get the conversation out in public. That's what we do on WMAL all the time. Speaking of J.D. Vance, he did an event today. He's campaigning today, and he heard the clip of Kamala Harris on The View. Kamala Harris said that she can't think of anything that she would have done differently than her colleague Joe Biden. And here's J.D. Vance reacting to that.
But she walks into The View, and you would think that would be an interview, and you know what they asked her? They gave her a softball, an easy question, really propaganda. They said, can you name a single thing where you disagree with Joe Biden? Now, let's back up for a second, because remember, Kamala Harris's entire campaign is to pretend that she hasn't been the vice president for the last 3.5 years. She stands up before crowds, and she'll say, on day one, we're going to tackle the affordability crisis. On day one, we're going to secure the border. And you listen to her for 5 minutes, and you think, Kamala, are you going to vote for Donald Trump? Because you've been vice president for 1,400 days. You haven't done anything. So you think after all this time of thinking about how she would do things differently from Joe Biden, she would have a well-prepared answer for the interviewers on The View. Well, they ask her one thing you would do differently from Joe Biden. You know what she says? I can't really think of anything off the top of my head. Now, in her defense, I'm not sure she could think of anything off the top of her head, whether about Joe Biden's policies or anything else, but think about this. For the last 2 months, Kamala Harris has been telling the American people that she's going to do things differently than Joe Biden, where she increased the cost of groceries by 25%. The average Michigan family is paying $1,000 more per month. That's $12,000 per year to afford today what they could have afforded when Donald Trump was president.
Yeah.
The border is wide open thanks to our illustrious border czar, Kamala Harris. And her entire campaign has been to pretend that she doesn't bear any responsibility for the policies, even though she's the sitting vice president.
So don't let her get away with it. There's J.D. Vance today in Michigan reacting to Kamala Harris's abysmal performance on The View, which is just remarkable. And Kamala's losing people that she should have right there in her corner. There's a guy who hosts the Breakfast Club. His name's Charlamagne Tha God. That's what he calls himself. His real name's Leonard. And he said this week that, this Trump-Vance messaging where they talk about taking care of Americans, and it's weird. That's kind of appealing.
One place where I think they mess up in regards to messaging, like, you'll listen to a lot of reporters and they'll be talking to Trump or J.D. Vance and they'll be talking to them about things that are happening right here in America. Mm-hmm. Because it is an election season right here in America. So it's so many things that we care about here, like, right? So it's always America first. But then, you go to Tim Walz and they're asking him about geopolitical politics. Mm-hmm. And I think a lot of times that makes them sound, very out of touch. That makes them sound very out of touch to what's actually going on right here in America.
Or talking about things that's happening overseas and not talking about what's here. But that's what they're being asked.
Exactly. Not saying that stuff is important, but that stuff gets highlighted over, what's happening right here in this country. And when you hear, the Vances and the Trumps talking about what's happening here at home and saying things like America first and make America great again, that messaging sometimes resonates a lot more.
Absolutely.
Not sometimes. It does resonate a lot more.
Because people they live in it.
Exactly. Because you saw what happened in North Carolina. As soon as you, I think this weekend they announced how much money they were sending to, I think it was Lebanon. Mm-hmm. People got outraged.
Yeah.
They was like, yo, what about us right here in North Carolina? So like that America First messaging goes much farther, especially during election season.
Yep.
I can see why this is an appealing message. It has to do with the voters. This is very simple stuff, isn't it? So President Trump, that has been a feature of his entire existence within politics, and even from the outside when he talked about politics, it's about, what's good for Americans? Who's taking advantage of us? How can we stop that? This is simple stuff. But when he does this, when he brings up what has happened to this country, what Biden and Harris have done, how Americans are poorly served by it, how it's not good that 13,000 illegal immigrants who are convicted murderers who are in the United States right now, it's not good to have that. How does the media treat that? Do they say, oh, he's got a good point? He's got a good point. We should resolve that problem. That actually would be important. No. Instead, what you get is what you just got this week on CNN. She's a Democrat strategist, right? Her name is Aisha Mills. She was a CNN guest, and she went on an unhinged rant that Trump is literally Hitler because he doesn't want illegal alien murderers in the country. They were reflecting on a conversation President Trump had this week with Hugh Hewitt. Take a listen.
Donald Trump during an interview with Hugh Hewitt this morning and talking about immigration and brings up genes. And by that, I mean genetics and the genes of immigrants coming to this country. I want to listen to this. We're going to listen to it for the first time all together here, okay?
How about allowing people to come through an open border, 13,000 of which were murderers, many of them murdered far more than one person, and they're now happily living in the United States. Now a murderer, I believe this, it's in their genes.
What did he say? Did he say, when it comes to murder, it's in your genes? If you're a murderer, it's in your genes. So why are we going to introduce murderers to the country? Is that an objectionable statement? Do you think? I don't think so. No, we don't want murderers in the country.
And we got a lot of bad genes in our country right now.
We have a lot of bad genes in our country right now. Talking about the immigrants who come over, he was calling them murderers.
I love how sanctimonious this is. He admits that this is the first time he heard the clip. He just said a moment ago, let's all listen to it for the very first time together, and now we'll judge it negatively in its worst possible light.
That discussion about the genes of immigrants, Aisha, your first reaction?
Aisha, the Kamala Harris pusher.
My first reaction is that we have long known that Donald Trump has revered the Nazis. He has revered Hitler. He's read his book. He used to say he had it on his nightstand. Donald Trump has had a very philosophy.
Wait, he read history. And so he reveres Hitler and the Nazis. Where have you found any evidence to support the vicious slander that you're now advancing over CNN?
Wanting to be a dictator, absolutely dividing people up based on who they are, based on factors about them.
I'm sorry. Did he make FEMA judge people on the basis of their skin color before they receive aid? Did Trump do that? Was that Trump's thing? Oh, that's the Biden-Harris thing.
Have to do with their race and their gender, etc. And when he uses language like this, I don't think that it's a Freudian slip. I think that the danger of a Donald Trump is that he would absolutely try to exterminate an entire group of people because he thinks that their genes are somehow different than his and faulty.
Correct me if I'm wrong. Did CNN offer robust pushback to that? Did they correct all of that on the air? Did they apologize to their audience that such delusions were just broadcast over the air, that they had an out-of-control guest, that should have never happened? She won't be welcome back on the network. We should not do that. That has no place in American politics. That's the type of language that leads to the assassination attempts we've seen on Donald Trump. This network gives a hearty apology to the American people because that was just aired over our airwaves. Anything like that? No? Oh, my goodness. James Earl Jones got out just in time. This is CNN. This, isn't it? That's CNN for you. Yeah, Donald Trump's going to exterminate entire groups of people, says a CNN guest, and they all nod their heads along as she says it. It's insanity. It's insanity. There are worries, of course, about what it means if Kamala Harris wins. There are a lot of worries about what that means because we've seen the way that they exercise power now. How much worse could it possibly get? Well, Elon Musk is wondering. He's concerned, but he's decided that he's all in. Remember when Elon Musk endorsed Trump? Elon Musk's endorsement for Trump, his full-throated endorsement came on July 13th. It was July 13th of this year, in case you're wondering. And perhaps you don't remember the context for that. That was the day Trump was shot. And then he stood up and he pumped his fist and he said, fight, fight, fight. And this very weekend, this past weekend, they finished that rally, this time with Elon Musk in attendance, supporting Donald Trump and saying, America is the land of the brave. Land of the free, home of the brave, he said. And he talked about how Trump is brave, how Trump showed courage under fire. And Elon was talking to Tucker Carlson this week and was kind of going through the scenarios of what might happen should Kamala win. And here's how that went.
If she wins, I mean, how can they let X continue in its current form, in its current role in American society?
They won't. They will try to shut it down by any means possible.
What do you mean by any means possible?
I mean, with either by they'll try to pass laws. They'll try to prosecute the company, prosecute me. The amount of lawfare that we're seeing taking place is outrageous. There are many examples, but like the Department of Justice, for example, launched a huge lawsuit against SpaceX.
Just want to point out something. So what Elon Musk is saying is grounded in reality. It's grounded in evidence. It is based on the way the government has wielded power over the social media companies to get them to censor the American people already. That's already taken place. So you get the CNN lady, the lunatic, who's saying that Trump is Hitler. He's going to exterminate people based on literally nothing other than her trying to scare voters into compliance. Elon Musk is talking about a very real threat to speech because the left is constantly either exercising censorship or fantasizing about that. Hillary Clinton this very week said that we would, quote, lose total control. When she says we, she doesn't mean me and you. She's not talking about us. She's talking about Democrats are going to lose total control if social media companies don't censor more content. She's promoting regulation of those companies. She wants to shut down speech. So Elon Musk is talking about a real and very scary phenomenon. And so he starts reflecting on SpaceX. SpaceX has some big government contracts. And as Elon points out, it's not because they have any special love for Elon Musk. It's that he's the best at it, and he comes at a great price. It's very simple. It's very simple economics, and they can't do it without him. In fact, SpaceX is saving astronauts from the space station right now as we speak because Boeing failed in its mission. So SpaceX is cleaning it up right now.
For failing to hire asylum seekers.
Come on.
Just let me back that up again so you can hear that. He says the DOJ is suing SpaceX for failing to hire asylum seekers, illegal aliens.
There are many examples, but like the Department of Justice, for example, launched a huge lawsuit against SpaceX for failing to hire asylum seekers.
Come on.
Yeah,
asylum seekers?
Not asylum, those who've been granted asylum seekers. Now there's also a law called International Traffic and Arms Regulations that because SpaceX develops advanced missile technology that can be used in nuclear ICBMs, that we have to be very careful with who we hire. We can only hire someone if they're a permanent resident or citizen. That's what the ITAR law says. Then there's another law that says that you cannot discriminate against asylum seekers. So we're damned if you do, damned if you don't. The DOJ did a massive lawsuit against SpaceX for failing to hire asylum seekers, even though it is illegal for us to hire asylum seekers under ITAR law. This is an actual thing that's going on, and they can only do a fairly small number of lawsuits every year. So why did they pick this one?
Because you want X.
Yeah, lawfare.
So the Biden administration is attempting to hurt Elon Musk by putting him in an impossible situation. They have two laws that are diametrically opposed to one another. It's impossible to be compliant with the law in that circumstance. And they're saying you need to hire illegal aliens to work at your company with some of the most critical cutting-edge technology that's of interest to the American people on the entire planet. That's the situation they're putting him in. And it's not the first. Elon's been constantly attacked by the Biden administration since the very day he came out and said anything about his defense of free speech, and certainly since taking up the mantle of supporting Trump for president. Well, the biggest story in the country right now, completely outside of human control, as a massive, massive hurricane, Milton, is barreling towards the Gulf Coast of Florida. So many Floridians, millions displaced at this hour, on the move, evacuations continuing, people parking on bridges to keep their vehicles, maybe their second vehicles, above the waterline. It's going to be rough 48 hours, a lot to keep track of. We'll bring you the updates here, the way it's all being handled, and the aftermath. All ahead on WMAL. The great one, Mark Levin, here up next.